All right, guys, welcome to the Inner Citadel. Bit of a late night live stream recording thing here. Couldn't sleep. I have really bad insomnia, so figure I might as well make the most of it. A little bit of a departure. We're not going to be talking about a book or a specific intellectual tonight. I kind of wanted to go over a kind of a path forward, if you will. So I wanted to start by talking about some of the issues on the right, what they are, and how we can move forward. Give me 2 seconds to arrange my screen a little bit here. Okay. And I was going to publish an article about this, but instead I figured a podcast would be a little bit better suited. We could interface that way. So if you're on the right wing, you know that we have struggled for forever, really, to gain cultural relevancy, at least since the Second World War. We've been unable to win the hearts and minds of kind of what passes for elites in our society. And when I say elites, I mean academia, scientists, politicians, that those sorts of types. Now, I want to get this out of the way up front. I'm not a populist. Populism matters in our spheres, particularly because we live in a democracy. If you're here in the United States, or if you're in any Western nation, really, you live in a democracy, ostensibly. So populism does matter to one degree or another. Whether or not that's something we want to admit, it's up for debate. But if we want to gain any form of political power, we need to win elections. And to win elections, you need to win the population. Part of the reason I'm not a populist is because political movements aren't started with grassroots. It's so rare. I know what you're saying. I just got done talking about insomnia, and here I am drinking an energy drink at 1 a.m. There's a reason for that. No, I will not elaborate. I just opened it, and that's my first one of the day today at 1 a.m. My most recent one, other than this, came at like 10 a.m. yesterday. I have to go to work after this, so I'm committed to just being up all night. Where were we? Oh, yeah. So political movements they're not grassroots. And you might say, oh, well, civil rights. It had massive funding, political backing. Things were already headed that direction. It was a top-down concerted effort by the American establishment to have civil rights be the case. And that had been the policy of the Union since at least the Civil War. That's what Reconstruction was all about, was essentially integration. Don't believe me? Go look at the Boston riots during desegregation in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And tell me I'm wrong. I'm not wrong. You might say, oh, well, the American Revolution was grassroots. No, it wasn't. It was not. Do you know who the 100 richest people, the 100 wealthiest people in the country were at the signing of the Declaration? It was the guys who signed it. That's who it was. It was wealthy landowning aristocrats who did not want oversight from England. That's who it was. And this is pretty much the cultural trend through history. French Revolution, same thing. Obviously not completely top down, because there was a king and he obviously was not bought into the revolution. However, throughout history, you get this power dynamic of kings versus aristocrats, and they clash. So typically what happens is the king is a mediator for the population. Aristocrats are engaged in a power struggle for the king's resources, or for what they perceive as their own resources over the lands that they govern. In ancient Greece, this wasn't an issue because you didn't have kings. You had an aristocracy, and then there were like very small forms of, I guess you could call it democracies. At least there was a democratic process. But the people who participated in that democratic process were the elites. It was the aristocrats. It was the aristocracy. So if we want to win, we have to either A, build our own elites. We need our own elites. That means people with money. That means people in high places and institutions. And that means people with actual political capital. The far right doesn't have any of that right now, in case you've been living under a rock. Or maybe you're just some like turbo leftist and you think that like the Republican Party is far right. I don't know. If that's you, see yourself out. I can't help you. So we need elites. However, we don't have any sway with institutions, academia, scientists, politicians. Sorry, I'm reading over my notes. I'm not used to the video thing, giving it a try. So basically what I hope to accomplish with this is to essentially provide a refresher on how we got to where we are today. And I would also like to elucidate some fresh perspectives on that, if there's any fresh perspective left to be gleaned. And then I also kind of want to discuss where to go, what we do about it. It's a big problem I see in online spheres is everyone can point out the problem. Everyone can point out the problem. Nobody wants to solve the problem. So politics is often described as war by other means. In the modern world, this takes shape as a war for hearts and minds. And it's paramount that we understand that we do not win this war through weaponized autism and based Hyperborean edits. I do think there's a place for those things. However, they're not sufficient to put forward as a unified platform by which we accomplish our objectives. And furthermore, will only alienate those who we seek to win to our cause, as well as further push our arguments and ideals from the zeitgeist. To understand the weaponized autism and the Hyperborean edits, you kind of have to be initiated, right? Like you had to be there. And most people weren't there, right? They weren't there. Okay. During the Second World War, the Western powers aligned themselves against the communists to defeat fascism. After the war, these same powers aligned themselves with aligned themselves against communism. And this came after a tacit approval that the far left regime was a greater threat than a far right one. So Western governments had to perform an ideological sleight of hand. The West doubled down on liberalism, painted the Soviet and Chinese regimes as ultra-nationalist, or in other words, as far-right regimes. During the same time, segregation came to an end, civil rights was codified into law, and the Immigration Act of 1965 was passed. All of these became a sword by which the American political machine drove into the hearts and minds of the citizenry to prove that it was the West and not communism that upheld a true liberal ethic. At the same time, you had the long march through the institutions, which was taking place, the academic upheaval that replaced traditional Western academia with Marxist ideology, and the fate of the next 50 years of Western elite and political production was sealed. The sciences and the scientists who perform the research, the institutions that lecture and direct the funding, and the political establishment that legislates and provides funding, all built on the foundation of a military-industrial complex that believes going further left actually separates you from existential threats. And that's not even talking about the foreign lobbies that have a vested interest in keeping the game going at nearly any cost, which I'm not going to talk about today, or for a while, largely because I am currently gainfully employed and would like to keep it that way. If you haven't figured out, or if this is your first time joining us, the purpose of the Inner Citadel, what we usually do is we go through philosophy texts, whether it's Nietzsche or, Kierkegaard or Evola, and we kind of just like break them down, lecture through them. And we typically stay away from geopolitics on this program. I'm breaking that tonight because this is important, it needs to be talked about. So we're actually getting into some geopolitical struggle. So what do we do? How do we overcome the predicament we're in? Well, first and foremost, if you're a capable dude, you need to start a business. And you don't need to be like a tech billionaire to get off the ground. You just need to become a respectable business owner within your local community. Local politics do not require the funds vested that national elections, like the hoops that they'll make you jump through, the amount of money that you need. You can win local elections pretty easily if you already are an established member within your community. If you're a business owner, you're going to be an established member within your community. And then you run on a platform that actually has your community's interests in mind, right? So if you're a local business owner, you're going to have your thumb on the pulse of what is important to your community. It's also going to net you money and give you a skill set. You're going to be used to talking to people within your community, and it's going to help you catapult a political career. Or if you have no interest in going into politics, what it will help you do is find and fund people locally who are willing to do that. It's also going to give you, if you're a local business owner, it's going to give you an in with kind of the biggest obstructors to genuine right-wing policy. And I'm not Republican or libertarian economic policy. I mean like actual protectionist policy. This is going to be your Chamber of Commerce. This is going to be your local small business agency, the local SBA. It's going to open up federal grants for your business, things like that. And if you're able to turn it into something that's big, you can then take the assets, the knowledge, all the other good stuff that I just talked about, and perhaps put it towards something national. If you use AI to start a tech business, let's say, it's as simple as putting, something in your marketing that you're only going to hire American citizens. You're not going to bring in H-1Bs. Odds are you already know what's plaguing your local community, especially if you're in small town rural America. You're already going to know the issues that those people are facing because you live there. You're also facing those issues. And it's going to give you a way to actually combat what's happening. Because that's like the big thing with, I just watched Identity Politics with Kevin DeAnna, and he was talking about the AI data centers. And, conspiracy theories and all that aside, one of the things that he said is if you're from rural America, the places that these AI data centers are being built, part of the sell to you is that it's creating jobs. Yeah, but jobs for who was his point. If you're a young white guy in rural America, you're not getting that job. The AI data center is going to bring over H-1Bs to fill those jobs. So why should you support it? If you start a company, you're not at the mercy of an employer. And you also open up the possibility of creating jobs for your community, jobs where they don't have to compete with infinite foreign labor. That means you're going to pay a premium for that labor because they're not H-1Bs, but that will also give you political pull should you ever decide to run for election or, again, finance someone who will. Now, on the academia and science side of things, this is going to be, obviously, we're not going to win this war with like local elections, right? Like your local chamber of commerce seat or like county commissioner number 17 or whatever isn't going to be able to strip the academia from Marxist ideology or get scientists on our team, right? But what you can do is you can block local funding for state universities. Like if you manage to win a state level election, or if you have a university in your county or something like that, you can block government funding. It won't block federal funding, but it will block state or county funding to universities and institutions that fund our enemies. That's huge. Again, you're not going to compete with federal funding, but you can compete at a local level. Sorry about that. Secondly, I'm kind of coming from academia myself. If you are a student, if you're in academia right now, unfortunately, it is what it is. You're going to have to hide your power level. Simple as. I mean, you can, depending on the university you go to, you can probably let a bit slide. Depending on your major or degree, you can probably let a bit slide. As for the scientists, as a general policy, or as a general platform, going back to populism, why I'm not a populist. Elites are necessary. Everything's top down. And oftentimes, the general population is anti-science, anti-academic, all those sorts of things. You know, they buy into weird conspiracies. They do all the stuff. And I'm not saying that those things aren't true. But if you ask your average, I don't know, MIT grad who works at some biotech company why they're on the left, like, odds are Alex Jones is going to come up. And I love Alex. But I also don't want Alex writing policy. So our message to the sciences needs to be that we're going to unshackle you. We're going to free you from the constraints of liberal ideology to pursue what you actually want to study. If you look at the way science is in colleges and at like big science firms or like these big labs like CERN or whatever, if you look at the way that they have to get their funding, they have to apply for funding, first of all. They have to justify what they're funding or what they're researching. And if the state doesn't like it, the state won't give them funding. So they have to structure it in a way that benefits the state, that upholds the current order. If the science institutions are nationalized, you remove the struggle for funding, but you have to do it in a smart way. Like, you can't be like, okay, here's your shoestring budget, go further the goals of, I don't know, cocaine lab rats that are on the spectrum. Like, that's out. We're not doing that anymore. You need to again, assuming that the sciences actually get nationalized, you need to study things that are actually beneficial to the general public and also to the nation, to the government. And you need to do it in a way that is immediately beneficial and, like, you know, there's a huge issue with like a lot of these funded studies being like the results being faked or fudged, or the the data being um, not accurately portrayed in the final result, because the person who's funding it wants a certain result. So the study that gets published and peer reviewed after the fact reflects the desires of the benefactor of the study. Now, a common retort to this would be, yeah, but if it's nationalized, you're going to run into the same thing. It's just they're going to fudge the numbers in the favor of the government, and that's true. That can and does happen. But a lot of the science that the government actually does in house, they don't want it fudged because they are using that study for something. They're conducting the science to actualize it in the world. So if you fudge the data to give the government what it wants, well, then it's not going to work, right? The thing that you're building or the thing that you're trying to do it's not going to work. And this way, like, the government already has a ton of money like wrapped up in black budgets and things like that that go to Lockheed Martin or Raytheon or whoever. But like that, it's never it doesn't trickle down, right? Like, we have fighter jets that can go Mach 5 million, but like it's still going to take you 6 hours to fly from New York to Los Angeles. Some of that's because, obviously public transport planes, you don't want grandma going Mach 5 million. But you get my point, right? Like, this needs to be immediately beneficial for the people. It needs to be immediately beneficial for national interests. You don't have to worry about funding anymore, so you can actually conduct honest science, but you have to do it with the earlier caveats mentioned. And we're going to unshackle you. You don't have to bend the knee. If the data says something that academia doesn't like, you're not going to get canceled and lose your laurels over the study saying, well, actually IQ, yada, yada, fill in the blank. Back to populism for a second, and I apologize, this is kind of all over the place. It's pretty impromptu. I just, like I said, couldn't sleep and had some stuff on my mind. Back to populism for a second. What was I going to say? I had a whole thing I was holding in the back of my mind. Oh, yeah. Okay. Not back to populism. Back to you getting involved in your local community. In regards to the right, I know we have a penchant for sitting in our ivory towers and doing this. Really, we need to be engaging with the real world. Life happens out there. And I know that these liberal policies and ideologies that have trickled out of our academic institutions have made a normal life all but impossible for most people. But you can't use that excuse if you haven't tried, if you haven't genuinely tried. Like, it takes 10 minutes to figure out how to file a business license. It takes, if you've worked in a trade for, any number of years, odds are you have the know-how to do the job. It takes 10 minutes to file the license, bid on contracts, that sort of thing. Start as a side hustle, do it in your spare time. Not everything needs to be a get rich quick crypto thing. And if you don't work a trade, if you're like a manager at McDonald's, literally get on Chat GPT and just Google like quick business ideas. Obviously, this idea isn't going to be for everyone. And that, goes back to the populism and elite thing. Like people are different. They have different capabilities. They have different skill sets. You need to find your skill set, and then you need to try to find a way to monetize it. AI makes, it's not perfect. I get that. I'm right there with you on the AI slop stuff, but it does enable you to do things that even 5-10 years ago would have been impossible in terms of like building a business and becoming successful in your own right. The other thing with women, I'm sure you saw, I am married. And I know I hear so often from young dudes like, oh yeah, but like women today are all ruined and they're all feminists. And yeah, dude, I get it. But also, why do you care what a woman thinks? And I know that's unpopular to say. Maybe not in these spheres, but in general, like, why do you care? The awesome thing about women is that they're predisposed to just following people, right? Like they have high in-group preference, and they're like on the bell curve. They're all like pretty much in the middle. So if you can set yourself apart from the other people in your area by being a successful business owner, going to the freaking gym, being just generally competent, reading books, being an interesting guy. Like, if you meet a woman and she's a feminist, like, give it 6 months, dude. You can talk her out of it. I promise you. You can talk her out of it. Now, like, obviously, mate selection plays a role here. And not to, like, spurg out too much, but obviously, like, if she has the septum piercing and like a shaved head, maybe don't try her. It might be your thing, it might be what you're into, but like, do you really want this? Like, given recent events from this past week, do you really want that to be the mother of your children or potential mother of your children? Choose wisely. And I'm not saying like find her at a church or find her at like your local library. Like, it's not the 1950s. You're gonna have to be creative, but at least stack the deck in your favor. I mean, come on. If you make yourself more attractive by going to the gym, if you make yourself stronger, if you raise your testosterone by eating a healthy diet, just stop eating the slop. I'm not going to lecture anyone on sleep because I clearly here we are 1 a.m. Try to have a good sleep schedule. Do the healthy things, take care of yourself. Start a business, find a way to gain capital independent of your 9 to 5. You're going to set yourself apart, and women will take notice. And when they do, choose the best one, commit. You don't have to let her know you're committing. All the red pill stuff here still by and large applies. But like, give it 6 months, dude. She's gonna come around. Yeah, it's pretty much all I have. Oh yeah. In terms of interacting with the real world, like, I'm sure you can find like you need to find a tribe. Um, if you're a young white dude, this will probably be easier than you think. Most young white guys are plagued by the same things you are plagued by. It's just par for the course for the era we live in. Um, but there are places where higher testosterone guys will gather that will tend to be more sympathetic. The gym is an obvious like starter here. Uh, if you are a Christian and you go to church, go like find a good one, right? Find a good one. If you're young and Catholic, and it's kind of a coin toss. Some Catholic churches have, a young population of young guys who would be sympathetic. TLM is pretty much cooked at this point. If you're Orthodox, it's going to be super easy. It's going to be super easy. I myself am Orthodox. Um, it's easy. If you're Orthodox, it's easy. Yeah, by the way, while we're on the topic of Orthodoxy and just like finding a church and tribing up and all that, I saw a comedian breaking down what Orthodox means and like ortho and doxy. So, or dox in the Greek, it means correct opinion. So, like just go to an Orthodox church. It'll be easy. If you're Protestant, I I don't know. I I'm not Protestant. I haven't been to a Protestant church in like decades. It's been a long time. So I don't know what the landscape is like. Obviously, it's probably a coin toss, depending on your denomination and all that. And if you're not religious, gym, martial arts, probably not Magic the Gathering night at your local game shop. I would say that would not be like choice place to go to find like a sympathetic tribe. The bar also probably not a good choice. Also, you shouldn't be drinking. Like straight up, you shouldn't be. Also, really hard to talk politics with, or like ethics or philosophy or any of that kind of stuff with like drunk people. It's tough. Stay away from bars. Stay away from Magic the Gathering night. Warhammer might be okay. Try Warhammer. Again, you're going to need to start a business to afford the buy-in. But if you can afford it, or if you're already into it, maybe Warhammer Nights got you. I don't know. But the nice thing about the gym are martial arts classes. You're building strength. You're building a physique. Weaponize your aesthetics. Like, I talked about this the other day during the Mishima podcast. Like, aesthetics are a weapon. Like, if you spend any amount of time on X or Telegram or Instagram in like right wing spheres, you have for sure come across physiognomy. And basically, physiognomy, if you're somehow uninitiated, says that you can read certain things about a person by their features, by their appearance. So take care of yourself. Going to the gym is part of this. But like if you, I'm going to look it up real quick because Now, obviously, take this with a grain of salt because it's a Vice article. But Vice says gym bros more likely to be right wing a-holes. Science confirms. So again, like this is the kind of science that is just like out the window. Again, obviously we can infer that like if you're competent and beautiful, you're probably on the right. We don't need Dr. Michael Price to like conduct a study with taxpayer funds to figure this out, right? So the article says, to all you gym bro haters amongst us, come be seated. This one's for you. Science, objective, empirically tested science. The science that tells us the ice caps are melting has confirmed what many of us have long suspected. Gym bros are right wing jerks. New research from Brunel University finds that physically strong men who regularly go to the gym are more likely to be right wing and support social and economic inequality than weaker men. This explains a lot. Like Trump's weird grab and yank power handshake, he's just trying to assert supremacy over his fellow uncaring a-holes. Yeah, excuse me. A research team led by Dr. Michael Price assessed 171 men aged 18 to 40, collecting data on their height, weight, waist size, hand grip, muscularity, and arm and chest strength using a 3D body scanner. They also analyzed their political and social views, asking them whether they supported the redistribution of wealth, a key tenet of socialism, or believed that some social groups should have dominance over others. Participants were surveyed on how often they went to the gym and their personal wealth. Additionally, the men were categorized according to their facial attractiveness and perceived masculinity and dominance by a group of independent assessors. I've always been interested in the evolution of human morality, Price tells broadly. Over the years, I've recognized there's a strong correlation in male body size and shape with moral and political attitudes, and I wasn't finding them in females. So I wanted to do a large-scale study looking at men's physical shape in relation to their egalitarianism. The new findings build on previous research, he adds, that suggests that muscular men are more likely to support militarism and war. In the past, researchers discovered a significant correlation between men who are physically formidable and their beliefs that some social groups should dominate other social groups. Price is finding that rich muscle dudes are the worst. Like, dude, start a business, get some money, go to the gym, build some muscle, and like your life is just going to improve. Because people already thought this about, like, they already thought this about you to the point where they're like hypothesizing in university-backed studies that this is who you are. Fascinatingly, the longer men spent in the gym, the more likely they were to have less egalitarian socioeconomic beliefs. But is the gym turning men into entitled, unempathetic jerks? Or are they in the gym because they were born that way? In the article's defense here, are they in the gym because they were born that way? Or is the gym turning them into it? In the article's defense, I think I'm a big proponent of nature over nurture, and the science backs me up. I did in one of my psychology courses in my undergrad program. We had to do a nature versus nurture research paper, right? And pretty much, basically, the premise of the paper was, do you think that outcomes are more nature-based or nurture-based? And to essentially pick your side, and then are you in favor of it? A lot of the papers were nurture. I think almost all of them were. I I chose nature. I might have misspoke. Most of the papers were nurture. I chose nature. And in my paper, I referenced the twin studies. Now, if you're not familiar with the twin studies followed several twins who were separated at birth and kind of followed them through their lives. These were identical twins, and it's fascinating because in the case of these twins, separated at birth, right? So it didn't matter, like their socioeconomic status was different. Like one lady went to like a very wealthy, like Northeast, typical Americana aristocratic family, went to a Ivy League school. The other one went to a like rural middle America flyover country family. They had like the same favorite color, the same taste in music. They married a guy that had the same name. They both, like the one was a nurse, the other one became a doctor. You know, that sort of thing. Another interesting one was two twins out of South Korea. They were separated. I think it was in like the early 80s or the late 70s. Like I don't have it in front of me. I could Google it, but I already Googled one thing for you guys. I'm not Googling a second time. If you're interested, just you can Google South Korean twin study. You know what? I'm gonna Google it. I am gonna Google it. Okay, 1974. I was close. They split in 1976. One of the twins went missing in a local market. Despite a frantic search by the biological family, she was hospitalized, placed into foster care, and eventually adopted by an American family through an agency. The twin, raised in the U.S., submitted her DNA to the South Korean government database for reuniting separated families, leading to a joyful reunion with her family and identical twin sister in 2020. Key scientific findings. The IQ gap. Researchers discovered a striking 16-point difference in IQ scores, with the U.S. raised twin scoring lower than the Korean raised twin. It's interesting because the one who was raised in the U.S. was like the valedictorian at her school, went to a prestigious university, and it was the same thing with the twin who stayed in South Korea. But the one who stayed in South Korea ended up having like a whole standard deviation higher IQ. There could be an argument there about American culture or the food system or, all sorts of things. But I think it is safe to say that to jump into those crazy conspiracy theories I was talking about earlier, whatever they're putting in the water is making us dumb as well as gay. Shared personality traits. Despite growing up in vastly different cultures and environments, both sisters showed remarkable similarities in personality, scoring very high on traits like conscientiousness, self-esteem, mental health. I'm actually going to click on that article. Am I a robot? All right. Twins completed nonverbal reasoning ability tests, standard progressive matrices plus the SPM. SPM has 5 sections that become progressively more difficult. Each section has 12 matrix items consisting of nonverbal stimuli. Time limit was not given. Twin score was based on the number of correct answers. No deduction for incorrect responses. The split half reliably was reported to be 0.94. So they only scored 0.94 apart. Big five, mental health, job satisfaction. Twins completed the short form of the Minnesota Job Satisfaction Questionnaire. Questionnaire includes an intrinsic scale measuring personal values and interests affecting job status, medical life results, like family, biological family, family environment. Yeah, this is the Science Direct article on the monozygotic female twins raised apart in South Korea, United States. Interesting read. I can't remember if this was the source that I referenced the most when I did my research paper for this particular study. I did like 5 or 6 different twin studies that I cited. And obviously, nurture has some effect, as this said, but like it can only make it worse. Okay. And this is one of the things that bugs me to end about like the let's just throw money, and if we bring infinite third worlders here, then they'll become American. No, they won't. They can only make it worse. You can only make it worse. You can't add to something that doesn't exist, but you can make what already exists worse. And the same thing with the populism and elite thing. Like if you are, as Evola would say, an aristocrat of the soul, and Nietzsche has some really good points about the aristocrats of the spirit that I'm not going to get into the debate. But if you are someone like that and you haven't spent your life up to this point like engaging in the slop, and maybe you're already jacked, maybe like, you know, you're in a good position to build some muscle or lose some fat, and you could easily be considered jacked. The point I'm trying to make is like there is a natural elite, and it goes back to the king aristocracy and the lower classing I was talking about earlier. Bertrand de Juvenel has a book called On Power, and it's his thesis of how power functions in societies. It's very good. I highly recommend it. It was written during the Enlightenment period, so the end of it is infuriating because he refuses to kind of go all the way with the conclusions that he draws. In other words, he makes all of these very poignant points about the nature of power and power dynamics within the elite and the like middle and lower classes and the aristocracy versus the royals and all that kind of thing, or all those kinds of things. But at the end, he essentially is like, well, but like egalitarianism is true. So he kind of just falls back on that. Neither here nor there. One of the things that he notes is that the way power functions, you have the elite. So in the time of the Renaissance, there were still kings in Europe. So the kings would have been the elite. And then you have the alternate elite, or the middle, which in the Middle Ages would have been the aristocracy, or, like the priests, that the warrior caste, which was the aristocracy. Like it was the nobles who made up the brunt of the nines. Obviously, princes and whatnot were knighted, but they were part of the ruling family. So ostensibly in line to succession to the throne. So they were part of that, the high. So he has the high and the middle and the low. You have the aristocracy, who's the middle, and then the peasantry, which is the low. And the way that he says power functions is you have the highest rung allies with the lowest rung to wage war on the middle rung. In other words, the king protects his power by allying with the peasantry. So the peasantry sees the king as natural and good and as a justified position because the king provides services and protection and other things for the peasantry. And then the peasantry becomes the bulwark that fights the middle or the aristocracy. We still have this power dynamic. So if you're wondering why our elite class, why the political class, the academic class, the scientific community is constantly allying with either people who got here 10 minutes ago or the people who aren't actually building anything, it's because the middle, the competent people who actually do the vast majority of like genuine labor and creation are the alternate power elite, and they could easily displace the top rung of society if it weren't for them having to constantly deal with the peasantry. You still have that dynamic. That's why it's so important. It's like on the one hand, that's why they don't allow the right, the actual right, not the Republicans, not the GOP, but like the actual right to make it into this, like the current elite. Since the Second World War, the prevailing consensus among the establishment of Western nations has been never again. What that means for us is that by hook or by crook, we are going to have to claw our way into elite rungs of society. The easiest way to do that is business, especially in the modern West where, you know, the almighty dollar kind of reigns supreme, because we don't have a bloodline aristocracy. We don't have bloodline kings. And if England is any metric, when we do, it doesn't matter. We need to position ourselves as an alternative elite so we can ally with the low as a bulwark against the current established order. Trump did this successfully in 2016 or 2015, 2016, and obviously in 2024, where he, you know, came in as a member of the elite, as a member of the ruling class, and he formed an alliance with the lowest common denominator on the right and used them as a bulwark against the established order. It's a good playbook. The problem is, you know, none of us are Donald Trump. You know, we don't have decades of media appearances and, you know, real estate tycoonship to kind of sail us into the positions we need to be in, like now. But you can easily do it at a local level where it's going to make the most apparent benefit on your life as you see it in the day-to-day. Like, local government is so much more impactful in the way you actually live your life than the national government. Obviously, a bit harder if you're in a major city. I understand that relocating is not in the cards for everyone, especially if you're already established. Like if you already own a business and you're like in New York City or LA or something, and you happen to be listening to this and have this, you know, relatively the same opinions I do, like phone it in, maybe be a benefactor for someone in a local municipality. If you are in the cities, you can, you know, fund art and creative projects that are sympathetic to our cause. Because again, like the vast majority of people are not interacting with our based Hyperborean edits. but they do go to art galleries. They go to other, they'll see a statue or, some kind of whatever. I refuse to call them statues, whatever passes for art today. And if you're making good aesthetic art, it's going to stand out, and it's going to go right back into that physiognomy thing. Like, you're going to tell it's right wing when it's like a beautiful statue of like a beautiful woman or a jack dude. Same goes with music. A lot of right wing music, like Mr. Bond comes to mind. Great when you're with your friends. Awesome. They're never going to play it on the radio. Sorry. So, maybe finance like a local folk band or something, or start a local folk band and make music that flies under the radar enough, but is sympathetic to the cause, we'll say. Yeah, patronage is something that's often overlooked. And, going back to it, the prevailing wisdom, we'll say, is that cultures created in the cities. A famous Austrian painter said, no, it's not. It's invented in the hinterlands, and then it's refined in the cities. Part of the reason all the art today, whether it's Hollywood or music or any of these kinds of things, part of the reason it sucks is because they've barred the hinterlands from entry. So if you're going to create meaningful art to any degree, you're going to have to do it separate from the institutions that currently exist and reinvigorate them. And, the long march through the institutions that the Marxists led in the 60s was not much of a long march, because there was no defense mechanism for it. And you better believe they have a defense mechanism for us. And I know, you can't just start your own Hollywood. You can't just start your own, Universal Records. Like it's you need to be realistic. But with the way the internet functions today, you don't need to, start a business, fund a local artist, feature their art in a campaign that either you are running yourself or that you're directly involved in. Have a band or local musicians that are sympathetic play at, your rallies or whatever. It's a local rally, so, don't expect you're going to be Trump filling out stadiums, but it'll be enough to show that we're normal. Because again, populism, right? There's no way to do this without interacting with normies. So you need to signal that you're normal, and that, all the things we talked about just now, like you have to signal that. You have to signal competence. You have to signal health. You have to signal vitality, and you have to signal, to some degree, normalcy. Because until you're Elon Musk, until you're Donald Trump, the rules apply to you. And that's just the way it is. The rules apply to you. So I think that just about does it. We're at an hour. Hope you guys found this informative. Totally different than the normal itinerary. Probably shouldn't have done this on camera. Oh well. We're done. So it is what it is. Yeah. Cheers. See you guys next time. We are going to trying to think of what we're going to do next. I do have a show sponsor now, kind of. Logos Publishing. Use code Citadel and you'll get, I think it's like 20% off. They are a philosophy publishing company. They publish philosophy books. They send them to you monthly, custom artwork, and there's a few other things here pretty soon. This background is going to be filled with philosophy posters, which is pretty cool, courtesy of Logos Publishing. And I mean, they're, you know, they come in the boxes. So like, but they are, they're sending me Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra. And I know we already covered Thus Spake, but it was like very introductory. It wasn't a deep dive. So perhaps we'll revisit that. That won't be next. We might get into some more Nietzsche. I've been rereading a lot of Nietzsche recently, so that might be what we do. Maybe we'll get into Kierkegaard or someone like that. I do want to do Spengler at some point, but that's going to be like a months-long project. I don't know if you've attempted to read Decline of the West, but it is dense and there's a lot of groundwork to cover before we get into Spengler. So I think we'll probably do Nietzsche next. Actually, we might stick with Mishima. Actually, that's what we're going to do. We're going to stick with Mishima. We're going to diverge from Mishima a little bit, though, and we're going to do the Book of Five Rings. We're going to do the Book of Five Rings, and then we're going to do... we're going to go back to Evola, and we're going to do the Metaphysics of War. And we might get into some history in that as well and cover some like Thucydides or Tacitus. Do some European and Japanese military history. I think that would be cool. Anyways, good night, guys. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.